Good morning and welcome to Blain's Morning Porridge. It's March the 12th, 2026. This morning, winning the economic war. Let's start off with a quote. I flew B-52 and bombed them with the blues. The war in Iran is a kinetic feature of the economic hegemonic struggle between the USA and China. And President Trump will lose because his Iran war is unwinnable. Iran won't lose because it doesn't have to win. That's a recipe for a forever war and a definition of asymmetric warfare. The likely winner of a wider economic war will be China. Energy and supply chains are going to determine the future. It's a curious world that we live in. I had thought about writing this morning on the rising likelihood of a Super-El-Nino event developing in the Eastern Pacific and how that will trigger climate shocks and agricultural mayhem. But that's something that's going to happen tomorrow or the day after. What's happening today is very much more immediate. War is a continuation of policy by other means, said Carl Von Clausewitz, founder of the Prussian General Staff over 200 years ago. Since then, we've come to understand that policy and economics are interchangeable. War is a policy tool used to achieve economic objectives. Thus far, the immediate consequences of the Iran war are clear. Economic instability from an energy shock due to blocked gas and oil supply chains. Further consequences are still to emerge and will set what is a wider economic conflict between the America camp versus China and its allies into stark reality. Now, what follows is a very rough scenario of how the economic war is likely to play out in coming months and years. Last night, the 32 nations of the International Energy Agency agreed to open up their strategic reserves to provide a short-term relief to what looks like a long-term constraint to oil supplies. It's a smoothing gesture, and unless the Straits of Hormuz are swiftly reopened, it will do little to calm markets in the medium term. The volatility in oil prices we've seen since the start of the Iran war highlights a very nervous market, up and down in steep amplitudes, short cycle reactions to each and every comment, no matter how likely or unlikely they are. The economic trend, though, is seen in rising bond yields, highlighting how markets fear a stagflationary bust is coming. Now, some nations are more vulnerable than others for a variety of reasons, such as the UK's energy insecurity, Germany's military spending boost, while the USA's energy self-sufficiency has seen something of a Pavlovian flight back to dollar quality, which I doubt will be sustained. Now, it's not clear what Trump's objectives have been in this war. He has demonstrated the unparalleled military might of the USA. American buffs, B-1s, B-2s, F-15s, F-18s, F-22s, and F-35s control the skies, dropping a phenomenal tonnage of bombs on the rubble of Tehran. Trump sees wreckage as victory. Israeli-US intel has been generally superb, although the bombing of a girls' school was a tragic mistake, amplified by Trump's callous efforts to pin it on the Iranians. But aside from that, what has actually been achieved? Well, give Trump some credit. Intelligence does suggest he may have re-obliterated the Iran nuclear threat, having last obliterated it a few months ago, but there are very real intelligence reasons to think that Iran was getting close to testing a device with external assistance. Otherwise, thus far, all that Trump's war has empowered is an even more hardline Iranian government with greater reasons to hate the great Satan. He's destabilized the Gulf states by the attacks that have been made upon them, and there are few signs of a mass Iranian civil opposition on the streets. Sinking a few tied-up speedboats and calling them minesweepers does not make the Straits of Hormuz safer for shipping or invalidate shipping insurance contract clauses. In typical Trump style, he's managed to further destabilise the NATO-Western alliance by the unnecessary insults and petty squabbles with the UK and Spain. NATO has become a much weaker and less certain alliance over the past year due to Trump's narcissism and his demands to be treated as the primary leader, all of which suits Russia and China perfectly. Now, as I wrote earlier this week, Trump has walked himself into a bear trap called stalemate in Iran, and the longer it lasts, the greater the economic damage to the West will be. Trump does not appear to have understood the enemy and how asymmetric warfare works. Iran might well be bottom flat and be beaten on every metric that Trump presents, but it wins by inflicting a sustained energy shock on the global economy, which the West is singularly unprepared for. The consequences will be huge and extremely damaging, and as I noted, bond markets are now pricing for potential inflation from an oil spike-driven recession. The fear of rising rates is triggering concerns on the sustainability of the current AI boom, junk bonds, and private credit markets, where we're already seeing liquidity concerns, all of which could prove highly contagious across markets. Politically, though, the war is perhaps even more dangerous in terms of further polarizing Western democracies and creating greater political instability around market weakness and rising consumer prices. It's an extremely unpopular war. Even Nigel Farage wants no part of it, and it's looking likely to cost Trump Congress, meaning 2 years of angry, ineffective, lame duckery and electoral denial after he's wound everybody up. In Europe, the war is reinforcing the rising tide of young people embracing the radical left, like the Greens in the UK, which will reduce national resilience and the willingness to fight. Now, why does this all benefit China? Well, China will not fight for Iran or become directly involved. It would rather hold back and preserve the air of mystery around its recently acquired military prowess. Emperor Xi has read and understood Sun Tzu and the art of war. It is likely that China is supplying targeting information and giving ideas on drone and satellite reconnaissance gaps to Russia to pass on to Tehran, and it looks like North Korea has been providing expertise on the nuclear options. Russia has seen the value of its all reserves rocket and its power reinforce after Trump's call with President Putin earlier this week. Putin knows he will benefit from US war stocks being prioritized to further rubbleizing Iran rather than defending Ukraine and Europe. Now, China is prepared for an economic war. Some estimates say there are 3 years of oil reserves in stock. It can afford the Straits of Hormuz to remain sealed, causing weakness in the West. And if China can avoid the difficulties of mounting an invasion of Taiwan, but win over the island by economic means and through economic warfare, that's a massive win for Xi. Otherwise, sapping US strength and running down war stocks through a forever war in Iran is the second best option for him. China's objective is to break through the first island chain gap between Taiwan and Okinawa to give its fully expanded navy access to blue waters. But it's not just about oil. The Middle Kingdom, or China as some call it, also dominates the supply chains that enable the manufacture of practically everything in the West, particularly rare earths, which we all now know about. The reality is that without Chinese widgets, these are the nails that hold the shoe on the horse, Europe and the USA can't actually build very much, particularly complex weapon systems. In terms of energy, the USA is being forced to extend nuclear power plants' lives to power the AI boom, but the fact is it still buys most of its uranium from Russia. The ducks are aligning badly for the West, inflation undermining markets, political polarization and disenchantment with current leaders and an energy shock and supply chain blocks could all combine to confirm China as the leading global power sooner than we thought. Anyway, I'm out of time and I've got to rush off to catch a train. Thanks very much for paying attention this morning. You can find the Morning Porridge on www.morningporridge.com, and if you sign up, you'll get it delivered fresh to your email every morning. I'll be back again tomorrow with something completely different. Thanks very much for your attention. Cheers.